Rayman Raving Rabbids for the Game Boy Advance takes on the form of an earlier prototype for Rayman 4. Here you'll visit many of Rayman's nostalgic lands from previous games, such as the Dream Forest from the original Rayman. The game starts with the hero of the story, Rayman, who has found himself in a prison cell with no explanation as to why. He gets up and soon runs into Murphy, who gives Rayman the lowdown until he runs into Lee the Fairy, who fills him in on everything else that he has missed. As it turns out, the race of creatures known as the Rabbids were once peaceful rabbits who had only good intentions. That is, until the people of Rayman's world abused them. Enough was enough. These now disturbed bunnies make it their goal to punish those who wronged them. Alas, somehow Rayman ended up in the mix. The Rabbids now continue to patrol the wildlands and trap the ne'er-do-wells. It's up to Rayman to put an end to their plot and free the prisoners. What happens after that plan is up in the air. I'm not sure if the locals would just go back to terrorizing the rabbits or some peace would be made. By the end of this GBA adaptation, your only real closure is that Rayman has saved the land after defeating the giant rabbit ship. What does Rayman Raving Rabbids have to offer? Well, it's another 2D platformer with a very similar visual representation to Rayman 3 on the Game Boy Advance. In fact, it shares many similar elements as well, like relatively pointless racing segments and a temporary flight option that halts after a few short moments. They also both have genuine flight segments that allow Rayman to fly infinitely. It's worth considering that the game's art, as far as I can tell, is entirely original and made exclusively for this game. Rayman was given a new sprite sheet, and no enemies from previous GBA installments were reused, besides these ascending fish from Rayman Advance, which for some reason have the same death sound as the Robo-Pirates from Rayman 2. And I guess they also reused the Rayman 2 completion sound, but that's something I can easily get over. Yes, the pointless references and otherwise unrelated Rayman games are absent this time. But of course they had to sneak the Rayman 2 barrel throwing boss mechanic in there, because it can't be a main series Rayman spin-off without the barrel boss mechanic. Funnily enough, the game sets up the perfect scenario in which to reuse elements, but I think generally speaking, Ubisoft was tiring out of that concept with the many other Rayman games that did just this, so they approached this one with a more unique spin. The music is entirely original, coming from no game before it, and the enemies here are rather rehashes of older enemies, though given a completely different design. And hey, in this one you get to see Pink before his robotic skeletal insides were exposed. That's pretty neat. All being said, these elements are in relation to the game's art direction. When it comes to the illustrations here, there's not much to complain about. What this game really fails in is its programming. Oh dear, this game's programming is a mess. Firstly, I'll talk about the programming mishaps in regards to the art. When Rayman gets close to a ledge, he plays a wobbly animation, as he has in prior games. However, here it seems to be fairly pixel perfect. Rayman can pretty much stand on the very edge and this animation still won't play. Also, upon getting off a ledge, or at least getting close to one, you'd likely then press the jump button, correct? Well, more often than not, here Rayman will go into helicopter mode, which often as a result has you dive straight into a hazard. Typically it'll take a moment or two for that ability to be usable mid-air, but in this one you can activate it at any time in the air, even immediately after slipping off an obstacle, which is the mistake here at play. If that isn't confusing enough, animations for Rayman will often show improperly on the character. They can be broken very easily by basically any sort of hit point. When you get hit, just perform a different function and you'll probably find Rayman doing the second thing with the animation of the first thing. That will also often coincide with the sound that can loop for the wrong animations, like Rayman's helicopter hair for example. Also in the sound department is the Rabbid death sound, which plays for almost every enemy in the game. There's also yet another graphical oddity, being the actual Rabbid robot that walks around on two very skimpy legs. He has no death animation, none at all. There are several neutral explosion graphics in the game, all they had to do was program it to this robot as well. Instead, the character just scanlines out of existence. Okay, so I guess now is a good time to say that the game was clearly rushed. I can now see the reason for delaying the Nintendo DS release by 4 additional months. Probably spent ironing out the bugs that the GBA version simply ignored. That's right, I dedicated an entire page to the glitches in this game. It is absolutely cluttered with them, and I didn't even mention the one rabbit robot spawn in the last world, where if you defeat him, the graphics f*** up entirely, making the game borderline unplayable. You absolutely 100% have to skip this enemy or the game becomes unplayable. Whatever playtesting was done for this one was incredibly minimal, and with a playtime of roughly 2 hours, you seriously mean to say none of the people who worked on this sat through the game once? This enemy is very intrusive, by the way, so skipping it naturally pretty much isn't going to happen. The laser it shoots is so consistent that once you're within its line of sight and have ducked out of the way, there's virtually no way to escape without taking some damage. To boot, the thing is constrained between both spikes and a nearby wall, all taking place minutes after the start of the level, without any checkpoint in sight. Oh wait, now I've taken up almost 2 pages! But let's take a look into the game's mechanics. The level design, the meat and potatoes per se of what makes up Rayman Raving Rabbids on the Game Boy Advance. While the approach is very similar to Rayman 3 on the system, this time there is a new gimmick introduced, which would be the costume abilities. These, like Rayman's combat fatigues in the console version Rayman 3, give Rayman different ways to interact with the environment. There's a gangster costume that allows Rayman to ground pound, an emo costume that gives Rayman the ability to shoot sticky gum from his mouth, a granny costume that lets Rayman place a carrot to lure in the Rabbids, a retro rocker costume that gives Rayman a bit of a shockwave push effect that kind of works like a baseball bat somehow, and a disco outfit that lets Rayman shoot powerful glowing balls that can wipe out the tougher enemies. Lots of possibilities here with these outfits, one can imagine, so how well are they integrated into the game? Well, barely at all. In fact, you could probably count the number of times you use the individual outfits in a single digit. After you get a new costume by defeating one of the game's bosses, you'll use it for probably just the following level and then never touch it again unless the game designers happen to remember it exists at random points throughout the game. The worst part might be selecting them. You have to hold down the right button and slowly scroll through them and wait for the transitional animation that plays. Couldn't this just be done by pressing L and R? Why make this so complicated? The game starts off by acting like these will be a pretty big deal, giving you on-screen prompts that show you what these abilities can perform. But as the game goes on, these prompts discontinue and you're left to figure out what's interactable on your own. See this lollipop? I can't move past it, so I guess I missed something? Well, no, actually, I have to hit it with my guitar so it'll pop off and act as a platform. Huh? Sometimes these will incorporate into boss battles as well, of which there's only really one, by the way, over and over in different locations. Here's an example of where you have to slam the rabbit into... Oh my god, that's pretty brutal. Maybe if the game utilized these costume abilities better, the player would more easily recognize obstacles that required them. But you'll just find yourself forgetting they're there in the first place and end up tricked when the game expects you to know to use them. Oh, there's one of those ice cream tops I knocked off with the guitar a couple minutes ago. That's still making the rounds for summer. Oh, there it is again. But I think I've talked enough about this game's bugs, frankly. It's just getting a bit ridiculous. You know, it's funny too, because when you take a look at this game, it doesn't really look bad. There's parallax scrolling, there's details in the backgrounds, a few of the characters are a bit lackluster, but it's all well beyond the acceptable level. However, there's more unacceptables here, like the moving platforms that often spawn just out of your reach once you've come close enough to them, having you wait a good number of seconds before it comes back down to jump on. More unacceptable than that are my segues that are quickly becoming obvious ways to lead into another negative, but really, how do you introduce this stuff? This game is just a mess. It's not all bad though, in fact there's ironically some good moments to appreciate here. Some of the music is alright, some of it is terrible too, but you probably expected that. The level design is sometimes pretty entertaining though, despite its constant problems. Generally speaking, I think Picture City was the best of the bunch. In fact, this world as a whole is pretty good. Comparing it to the rest of the game bears a huge difference. It is, however, the very first world in the game. You'll move through the levels quickly as there's virtually no backtracking involved, so you can constantly stimulate yourself with whatever's coming up ahead. I can appreciate a well-paced adventure as long as it doesn't have so many problems that distract your attention from it. Though, a part of me thinks this form of entertainment is solely due to the art design, which is very creative at times. Rayman can climb up coffee wafers and will jump from jello plate to jello plate, pass by the odd cockroach, and land right into a menacing book monster. This is all probably just a barrage of ideas from the Rayman 4 prototype, likely stemming from the artistic mind of Michel Ancel. So I guess credit where credit is due, but that credit is seemingly more and more to be the only real appealing factor to this game, besides the intriguing storyline, which is also from a branch of Michel Ancel's concept tree. Some of the concepts don't even work well at the game's design because I'll often jump from a jello plate right into a flying rabbit creature, though that's not really restricted to this type of platforming as they quite often just launch onto the screen to take some health away from you at random. Luckily, I was able to come across a bit of an exploit where you could farm extra lives. This first level in the dessert world has an extra life close to the entrance, so I just kept going in and taking them, then leaving. They kept showing up, so you can just keep doing it. Unfortunately, after 9 lives, you can't go any further. If you actually pursue doing so and lose a life, you'll end up with just 8, so that's, well, it's just a really small cap, honestly. I figured I should mention this rabbit shooting minigame that exists twice, count 'em, twice in the game. It has you shoot these cardboard cutout rabbids next to Murphy drawings. At one point, you have to do this to pass through the rest of the level. Why? I don't know. So once you finish the game, you're rewarded with nothing. And even if you go for 100%, you get nothing. Wait, so you mean to tell me I collected all those lums, broke all those cages for nothing? Then why did I waste my time? Why did I even bother with your useless collectibles? If I had just run through this game and avoided those completely, I bet the game would just take me like an hour to complete. The amount of content here is feeling similar to the best that you'd see on a mobile Java game. I've played all that Rayman had to offer there, and even the best of the best on that platform is nothing too special. In conclusion, this, well, it exists. In my perspective, it exists to expand the lore of the Rayman Raving Rabbids series, and show off the potential Rayman 4 would have had if it ever came to be. Beyond that, it's just a really broken platformer. If Rayman 4 ever actually comes out like Ansel has teased over the years, and it turns out anything like the concept he initially planned, then there'd be no reason at all to glance over at this one. While some elements from the Rayman 4 Rayman Raving Rabbids prototypes may be entirely lost to time, like mounting creepy critters and, having a girlfriend for some reason, these ideas don't by themselves have much to linger onto. So for what interest still exists in this cancelled game, all I can say is, at least something still came out of it. Be sure to leave a comment as YouTube puts videos with more comments in Users Recommended tab. Just being honest with ya, have a great week.